Welcome back to Passionate About Music Education, a channel dedicated to you, the music educator. I'm Rachel Hardman, and today we're going to talk about returning back to work and the reality of returning back to work. I don't know about you, but I've been scrolling through Facebook and Instagram over the last few weeks, and you see all these amazing displays, and these teachers have been in on holidays to tidying their room and doing all this beautiful artwork, and that is fantastic. Then you've got other teachers who've gone on lots of PD, and they've done curriculum planning, and they've done this and they've done that, they've read this book, and suddenly you can be kind of really overwhelmed with, maybe I should have been doing this, maybe I should have been working on holiday, maybe I haven't done it enough, and that actually can create quite a lot of anxiety going back to work. And it doesn't matter whether you're a new teacher or you've been teaching for 20 odd years, that sort of anxiety that what's going to be like for this school year sort of kicks in maybe 3 or 4 days before the end of the summer holidays. So what is the reality of going back to teaching after a summer break, or even if you're starting a brand new job? Well, the first reality is, in the PD training session, I kid you not, you are not going to do the amount of work for yourself, for your students, that you plan on and that you think you will. And the reality of it is, you'll go into the school hall or somewhere equally as uncomfortable, sit on some dodgy old chairs and maybe some benches, and you won't be able to move for about 3 hours while they're talking to you about all the latest policies and the latest things that we all need to be aware of, and rules, expectations. I mean, you may be lucky enough to get some kind of inspiring guest speaker come in and actually talk about something that's, you know, relatable to the classroom in that way. But in reality, you are going to be sat at and spoken at for long periods of time, and that's quite intense. You also have to be on your best behaviour, so there's no joking with your colleagues and, you know, all that kind of stuff, because you're being watched. So you come away from that exhausted from listening, because you haven't done it for 6 weeks. You haven't sat in those meetings, so you've had a break. You have got up after 10 minutes and gone and got coffee, or just moved around. So, you know, your body's going to ache, you're going to be stressed, it's going to be a bit of tension in there. So you're not going to do the work that you think you're going to do, however best laid plans. Or what you'll end up doing is getting to 3 o'clock, being so exhausted from it all and listening to it, that you try to persevere through it like all your colleagues. Then there's a massive queue for the photocopier, you never get anything laminated, then you can't get on the computer, and your laptop doesn't work, and then you just go home fed up already. So joking aside, in reality, please don't go back and expect to do the massive amounts of work that you'll have in your to-do list during PD week, because it just doesn't happen. And you know what? That's okay, because that work will get done. You will get through that to-do list. It won't be the end of the world if you don't have the most perfect room for when the students return. Having taught for a long time, I'm always impressed at people who go in and do massive amounts of wall displays, and I'm guilty of it too. I did go in the summer, especially when I changed schools and I wanted to put a fresh, you know, feel on the classroom, tidy it up, work out what resources are in the room, rearrange them to make them work so that students can access them quickly, particularly instruments, so that when you've only got 45, 50-minute lessons and you've got 30 children, you want to be able to get that equipment out, get it used, and then put it away safely, and do that with a limited amount of time. So, you know, I don't see any reason why, if you haven't gone in and done your room, that, you know, that's lovely. But again, you may be teaching in the same school for a couple of years and you don't want to, because really that whole display is meant to be a demonstration of the work the children do in your classroom. So it's all good and well us putting all these lovely music posters up and inspirational keywords and, you know, all that, but really it then just becomes wallpaper in the classroom. People don't see it. So try not to think of your wall display as something that you have to have got done by the first day of term and then that's it. It's not. It's actually a reflection, and it depends on what you've got in your classroom, of your department throughout the year. It doesn't have to be perfect on the first day. Who cares? The kids don't care. They're not interested in what wonder. They're not sat there going, oh, Mrs. Hardman hasn't done a wall display, this is not good enough. I mean, seriously, what was she doing all summer? They don't care. They're interested in having a chat with their friends and catching up on gossip and who's sitting with whom and who's dating whom, especially in secondary school. So it's not as important as people keep making it out. And I'm all for people sharing all their amazing ideas on Instagram, Facebook, but also the flip side of that is this kind of guilt that we all start to feel that we should be doing more, that our room should look like some immaculate, piece of artwork as you walk in. You may have gone in during the summer and you may have done all of that. And then suddenly the classroom where you only had 22 students, now your timetable says you've got 27. So you've got to redesign the layout, you've got to redesign this, you've got to find extra tables and chairs. All stuff happens in the beginning of term that completely throws everything off. So it doesn't matter how planned you are at the beginning of term, so much changes and you have to be able to adapt to that change, that if you've stressed yourself out trying to get it immaculate and this is how I'm going to have my seating plan, then actually all of that will change. So by taking the pressure off having this perfection at the beginning of term gives you the ability to adapt and move with whatever happens within your school in that first 2 or 3 weeks. And I speak from experience because I started a new school a couple of years ago, and the head teacher, brilliant, amazing, but her first comment was, "Are you going to do wall displays?" And I'm like, well, I can, but maybe me picking up instruments that have been chucked in the practice rooms and putting them away so that they aren't damaged anymore. Or you moving the crash mat that's been stored in my classroom all summer out of the room so I can put some tables and chairs in and sort that out. Maybe me being able to get a projector that works so I can project PowerPoint slides and videos and YouTube so that my students are engaged in the classroom in the music activities. Maybe that to me felt much more important than whether I had a pretty display board. And you have to work with what you've got and the expectations of your admin, but this is a reality. This is not the glossy stuff you see on Facebook. This is real life teaching. So my next point is to do with planning and looking at your curriculum, how that maps out. Now you may well buy into a curriculum, might already have subscriptions, you might be brand new into school and not really know what their curriculum is, and you kind of have to go sometimes sort of ad lib as you're going along. Now I'm not saying ad lib every lesson because that's where you get yourself into sort of trouble with curriculum planning and you're not, you get overwhelmed because you're trying to plan something brand new every day for all your classes. But if you have a curriculum map plan of the kind of themes or topics that you want to do for each year group. So if you're secondary, you'll have your 7, 8, 9, then you'll have your GCSE or your IB groups or middle year programs, and so then you'll be planning for those. Now the thing is, generally the GCSE and the IB, or those high school ages, your groups will change. So what you were told in July before you broke up for holidays, you may find 3 of those kids have moved schools, especially if you're working internationally, and then you've got 4 new kids who suddenly either don't play a musical instrument or do play a musical instrument or play an instrument you haven't thought about, and you have to then start to adapt your curriculum to an extent to fit the needs of those students. So having some kind of outline where you have your topics, so I don't know, if you're doing year 7, it might be pitch notation in the first half term, and then rhythm, and then you might do moods in music, and then somewhere in those you're going to be teaching how to use the equipment in your classroom and composing and listening skills and understanding music. You know what you're going to do, you just haven't fleshed out your curriculum, and it's okay not to have done that all over the summer, especially if you're changing schools, because you really just genuinely don't know what the children have done unless you've had a fantastic handover and been given all the resources, and that's becoming far and few between as you change schools. So I see that less and less happening. So have a topic for the half term, have some kind of key concepts, but do not beat yourself up if you haven't planned every single lesson in detail, because things change, your class numbers change, the equipment change. Suddenly you're being told that you've got to go and teach general music, in the sports hall or in the hall or in a science lab. All this stuff is actually happening for teachers around the world. So what you would teach in your classroom with all your proper equipment, you might find that you can't do that in a science lab. Another piece of advice really for the start of the term is, obviously everybody is very keen on relationship building with students, getting them on side, making sure that that's inviting to the classroom, that you have good behaviour management and expectations and a safe environment for learning, and I'm all for that. careful with the expectation that seems to be out there that you must do lots and lots of games, the getting to know you games, and that, you know, 2 or 3 lessons on rules. That's okay, but remember that the child walking into your room, particularly in middle school and high school, go to maybe 10, 11 classroom teachers, and they may have gone and sat in, by the time they get to you on the Friday, they may have sat through 15, 16, 17 rules, expectations, getting to know your games, laminating, covering their book, yeah, all of this stuff. By the time they get to you, they're worn out. They don't want to play any games because they know everybody's name in the classroom and they know exactly who they're with. So sometimes it's just easier to get on with teaching, particularly for our subject, because we have so much limited time with the main curriculum that actually just getting on and teaching the children and using that, you know, 50-minute lesson or whatever time you've been given is really important, just to get them involved and get them up and learning. You can do the rules in 5 minutes, and if you keep your rules really simple, then and very clear and consistent every week. It's the same, you know, have your 3 rules. Mine were respect each other, so that you can work together, because you're going to have to do lots of group work, and that you need to learn to listen to other people's opinions. Respect the equipment, because it's expensive and it's not toys, they're musical instruments and should be used to make musical sounds, and that, you know, on the whole, maybe 300 children are coming through the music department each week who want to use that equipment, so we want it there for next week when you come back, in the same way as the next class want the equipment to be working. And the 3rd rule would be in terms of respect for the teacher-student relationship. So if you want me to talk politely to you, then you should talk politely back to me. If you want me to listen and help you, then you should be able to listen and help back. That's my 3 rules. And they've been the same rules for the last, 20 years. And I'm very clear, and I'll always go back to those rules throughout the term, because they're really simple. But I've gone away from write my rules down, let's spend the first lesson talking about rules and how to use equipment, because actually by the time they get to you on that 5th day of being in school, they just want to learn, they're ready to do it. So don't hold back on the teaching and learning. If you want a really great way of learning names, have a seating plan. Put them in a position or put them in a place in your classroom and write it down so that you've got their names, and have that in front of you every time that you teach them, so you can just refer to their name. That is the quickest way of learning names if you don't do name games. My next piece of advice really comes from experience. When you're a keen young new teacher, you try to do everything within that first couple of weeks. You want to go, let's do it, let's get the lessons up and going, let's get instruments playing, let's get the peripatetic teachers in, let's get band going, let's get choir going, because I've missed doing them and I really love doing them. And within the 2nd week, you're absolutely swamped because you're trying to manage your classes because they keep changing, and you're trying to rearrange your room and learn kids' names and get books in and plan your lessons, because actually everything keeps changing. And then suddenly you're adding in photocopying, part writing, practicing the accompaniment, and it's just overwhelming. So however much your peripatetic visiting instrumental teachers are desperate to come in on the first day, because of course they are, because they've gone all summer probably without earning very much money and just want to get back up and running. By having them back in too quickly causes conflict within your staff, because the staff need to see the children for the first week. They want to give out their book and get to, put them in a seating plan. They don't want your lessons disrupting straight away, and that's perfectly fine, because I wouldn't want that really either. If I think about it, I wouldn't want to be doing my first lesson and seat plan and all of that, and then suddenly kids going, hey, I'm going for a guitar lesson, see ya. So just hold back on your paris, and hold back on starting all your groups in one go, or especially if you're doing some kind of musical big production for Christmas and that's your main focus, just give yourself a little bit of space, because our groups are all year round, and they're not like sports where they're generally sort of term-based and seasonal-based. We're not doing choir for 4 weeks. We are just literally doing it for the whole year with all the different events that happen within it. So just pace out starting all your commitments over the first 2 or 3 weeks, so that you're not trying to do it in one go, because that will lead to you having to work till 9-10 o'clock, and then you're feeling overwhelmed and that sort of early burnout and stress, which nobody needs at the beginning of the year, because ultimately the children are still settling in and you're setting rules and getting to know your classes and which child works well and that sort of, especially if you're in a new school, it's just learning. There's a lot to already manage without adding it too quickly from yourself. However desperate you are, like I was always desperate to get the groups going because I loved running band and choir, just give yourself a little moment, because those kids will still come, they're still getting involved, and they also need a time to just find out what other clubs are going on. And my other bit of advice is make your schedule work for you. If you have, 2 days where you've not got any free periods, that's not the day to run a club. You might try and squeeze it in because it doesn't clash with football or something, but honestly, you'll just get exhausted, or you have to be realistic that you're going to be exhausted, and then you have to make sure that you've planned in advance. So whatever you do, try to give yourself the grace and boundaries so that you can cope with whatever you put on your day. You don't have to do a whole day of teaching and then 2 hours worth of clubs, when on another day you might have 4 lessons, a couple of preps, and then you can do your clubs, because you'll then always have time to do the photocopying or the part writing, or sorting out the next piece of music, or the admin that goes with running any kind of extracurricular event. And I think my last piece of advice that wasn't ever really shared too much is stop trying to reinvent the wheel. Reuse schemes of work that work. Go back, tweak them, change the videos, change maybe a listening resource, update how it's printed. Always do that self-evaluation of the work that you're giving the students and what works and what doesn't work. There's nothing wrong with that at all, because then you'll have even more incredible lessons with the students and they're learning more. But don't keep reinventing the wheel. If it worked last year, use it again, but just change it. Don't be afraid to pivot a little bit, but just sort of change it. Don't feel that every lesson has to be fresh and brand new and sparkly, because again, that additional pressure that you put on yourself is can be an easy way to burn out. And it's the same again. You see lots of people talking on Facebook and Instagram about themes for concerts. I think it's a great idea. I never did it. I would just literally go buy half a dozen pieces of music that I thought were great for the kids that I had at that moment in time, that gave them a new skill, a new style, pushed them on in a certain way. So my music was always bought for the children and the children I was teaching, the groups I had, my IB or A-level groups or GCSE. Then the theme sometimes came from it. Sometimes it was an obvious theme, like a stage and screen kind of theme. Did that quite a lot in musical theatre. But on the whole, that wasn't my end goal. I didn't get obsessed about themes, and they're lovely, and I think actually they're quite a great idea, but it should come naturally with the groups that you're trying to showcase. And again, there seems to be lots of people asking the same kind of questions, and if you're reading all of this on Facebook, you go, well, maybe I should be doing a theme. Why am I not doing a theme? Why haven't I done a theme? Maybe I'm not a great teacher, as I haven't got a theme. I've just gone and bought this piece of music because I thought the kids would like it. You have to work with what's best for you and the students, and you're the one who knows that, because you're in the unique place of being their teacher. You are the only person in that room teaching them music. You know exactly what they can and can't do because you see it on a daily basis. It doesn't matter what somebody's doing down the road, because they have a different set of students, a different set of resources, a different setup, a different school day, different admin, a different culture in the school. You can't really compare what you have in that moment in your classroom with other people. You can aspire to have it if it will match what you're doing and the students. You can aspire to have a stronger program, a stronger choral program, but you have to be honest with what you have in the classroom. So there's a balance between aspirational development for your benefit of your students and also the reality of the place that you work. So they're my top tips for starting back at work. Obviously teaching is hugely rewarding, because as soon as you're back in the classroom, you've done all that PD, you've catched up with your colleagues and spent a bit of time talking to them, which is really important, because to be honest, it's about the only time that you really, as a music teacher, kind of sit down and chat, because most of the time you're running around with a sandwich in your mouth off to another rehearsal. They're off doing some sports, or they're off doing artwork or coursework or exam prep. So it's a nice time really to take an opportunity to be with your colleagues and to get to know them. Enjoy the process of teaching, enjoy being back in the classroom, take the pressure off and just build those relationships with your students and share the love of music. Why did you get into teaching? Because you loved music. Somebody inspired you in some shape or form to love music, and you've gone to teaching because you love music and you love sharing that. So try to keep that in your mind and helping students navigate and understand the world they live in so that they can think for themselves and they can cope emotionally with the world that they're in. Particularly our middle school and high school students need that from us even more. What's your favourite tip for going back to school? I'd love you to leave it in the comments. We are a community here, and I will see you again here soon on Passionate About Music Education.